Welcome back to my underground lockup. If you saw my last video, you'll know that I'm in the process of restoring this 94 S-Works Prestige to all original XTR group set at great expense. Now, you may recall me saying that to replace this flawless and very valuable XT wheel set and XT cassette with almost priceless M900 XTR would be vulgar, if not obscene. But then, of course, time passes and I get bored and eventually this happens. When I was a younger man, I found this bottle and it was a dusty bottle. I gave it a little rub and this genie popped out. And he offered me 3 wishes. And obviously I went for tall and handsome and he sorted that out. And then my 3rd wish was to live my life surrounded by girls. And this was his interpretation of that, which is the reason why I don't have much time for wheel building anymore. Of course, every now and again they do sleep or can be distracted with a Disney film, and then I actually get to do this stuff. And also, I'm delighted to say that wheel building now is a lot easier than it used to be. Certainly when I had time on my hands, I was using much more primitive tools. I've now got the proper stuff and I'm using much better quality parts than I used to have access to, so I can't complain. And secondly, of course, YouTube now is absolutely full of brilliant tutorials for how to do this properly, rather than using lolly sticks and hammers like I used to. Now, as with all decades-old rarities, there is, of course, some backstory to this. This particular XTR hub came courtesy of my friend Dan Bonner, who is also on YouTube, feverishly building exotic bicycles for the duration of lockdown. I'll link his channel below because he's built some very interesting stuff and is still going. This was surplus in his collection. He's one of the original members of my oft-mentioned cartel of reclusive, eccentric millionaire gentleman collectors. Now, the next job, of course, is to build this onto the existing Mavic rims that are already on the S-Works. Now, if you're hoping for a wheel building tutorial on this video, I advise you to look elsewhere because no amount of time-lapsing is going to make this process look slick. You may also remember in my last video, I begged forgiveness for not planning to replace the perfectly good XT cassette on the S-Works with the correct top-of-the-range XTR one, mainly because of expense, but also I believe at the time I commented that you would need to have a brain the size of a planet to actually be able to detect the difference. But then up popped a man of just such a level of intellect, a viewer by the name of Newell on the other side of the globe. Huge thanks to Newell, because what he then did was actually donated free of charge his own XTR cassette to complete my build. So welcome to the cartel, Newell. Needless to say, honorary membership is yours. And of course, huge thanks for this cassette. Now, there is a difference and it's hidden at the back. Look at the machining on this 4-armed spider here. This alloy spider is just a thing of beauty and completely tucked away behind the gears. Now, if you'll permit me to geek out just for a second, what's interesting about this design of spider is that whilst you couldn't see it on the original M900, it became such an iconic piece of design that was synonymous with XTR that they actually picked up this design cue 10 years later in the M960 group set, I believe it was. This time the sort of drilled out 4-arm spider was the main design shape of the chain set. Now, the M960 group set is not as valuable or sought after as the original M900. It was quite short-lived because it had various flaws, but that chain set being the focal point of any bike that it was attached to is undeniably a thing of beauty, and it took its design cues from this original. The front hub that Dan has supplied me with, also XTR and also in perfect nick, is already laced to this evidently very high-end Araya rim, which is straight and true as a laser. However, we don't want Araya rims on the S-Works, we want Mavic. So much as it pains me to do this, all right, maybe I'm not going to use 30-inch bolt cutters to disassemble this wheel. That might be appropriate for parts that I find in skips and bins, but this is quite a nice rim and I think it will live another day. So I'm going to do it the craftsman's way. Evidently this originated on some sort of cross-country race bike because the racing snake that built it didn't even use rim tape. He or she used insulating tape, which was an old trick to save vital grams from your rotational mass. Suffice it to say, I will be using proper rim tape, because when you get as fat as me, saving grams from your wheels really doesn't make any difference. Thing I need to work out is just how to clean all this grab off it without polishing off what's left of this precious logo. I think WD-40 as usual. While we're on the subject of WD-40, I'm extremely proud of this workshop quick release holster that I recently made out of a broken tubular titanium bottle cage. Some of you collect sports cars, racehorses, fine art. This is my equivalent. Easy to set the dish on a front wheel, by which I mean centralizing it. Obviously there's no offset on a front wheel as opposed to the rear, where of course you have the gears on one side, so you have to compensate with different length spokes. Also, I'm going to cheat by putting the pre-existing and perfect front wheel from the S-Works into this rather cheap Chinese wheel jig, and I'm just going to mark off using masking tape where it sits against this gauge, and then when I rebuild the wheel with the new hub, it'll just match up with where this one was left. And there's our marker. And here we are ready for the build. Hub, spokes, nipples and rim all ready to go. Just a quick note on the old stuff. You certainly can reuse spokes and nipples when you're rebuilding wheels. There's no rule that says you can't. However, in this case, I'm not going to. These are going in the bin for one very simple reason. These are the spokes. Now, you can see that they're not in bad nick because they are stainless. However, the very generous lunatic who donated this bike to me, as I mentioned in previous videos, kept it in some sort of undersea mausoleum for a couple of years off the coast of Aberdeen, and the sea salt certainly did no good to certain parts. I know when I was undoing all these spokes and nipples that in several cases they were bonded together, fused by bimetallic corrosion. So the ones that were fatigued have been binned, and the ones that haven't yet snapped are certainly an accident waiting to happen. So this lot is going in the bin. Right, if you've made it this far in any of my bike restoration videos, then you're going to know that I love to geek out about bike science. So for the next 10 seconds or so, you've only yourself to blame. Right, here is an explanation of bimetallic corrosion. Now, the best wheels are usually made out of stainless double-butted steel spokes and brass nipples. However, it has been fashionable to make feather-light wheels with alloy nipples. Now, when alloy and steel are exposed to the elements, you occasionally get what's known as bimetallic corrosion, which, and I'm not a metallurgist, so I'm not going to explain this at all intelligently. It basically means that the corrosion causes some sort of chemical reaction, which actually bonds them almost like a weld, which makes it very, very hard to separate them. Now, a perfect example of this, if you watch the legendary Gary's projects here on YouTube, his most recent Diamondback build, which was a steel frame and an aluminium seat post, I think it was a 3-man job getting that seat post out, which he then had to bin because it was completely welded into the frame. Same principle, and it's something that I am not going to learn my lesson because I am going to use alloy nipples on this wheel build for no other reason than I think the blue looks cool. I know brass is what the world's best wheel builders would recommend, but I'm nothing if not vulgar. This is a nostalgia build, and blue alloy nipples is exactly what I would have used had I been able to afford it in 1994. So this is actually not taking me too long. I just need to tension these spokes and make sure I've got the dish correct, and then these wheels are ready to put back on. While we're on the subject of ultra rare and top end bike parts, these original M900 XTR quick release skewers are fabulous pieces of kit, and I do have a matching pair. But the real rarity is the other end. Now I've got one, and it's beautiful. It's a piece of sort of machined satin finished aluminium with a rubber O-ring still in place. You wouldn't believe how hard these are to find. And the missing one, I'm going to leave as a challenge to all of you basically. If anybody's got one, I would be very interested in hearing about it and potentially interested in making you an offer, because all I've got is this slightly later XT one, which, as you can see, it works, but it's not pretty. And of course I want this bike to be perfect. And there we go, one step closer to that complete XTR group set, which is no less than this bike deserves. So front hub spinning beautifully, rear hub and the cassette, thanks again Newell, full drivetrain in fact derailleurs, and of course this crankset, which does still need bead blasting. Once the finish is restored on this, and indeed on the chrome fork, then I do believe this is going to be the best example of an S-Works Prestige probably in the world. Anyway, it's going to be a while before I can get the crank and fork fixed, so in the meantime stay tuned, because very soon I'll be turning my attention next to finishing off this Dynatec Ogre Titanium with a few more purple bits. And anybody that lived through the 90s and likes mountain bikes will know the more purple on a bike when we were about 11 or 12 years of age, the better.